What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap. As always, I'm BruinSportsReport.com publisher Edward Lewis. As always, this is Ryan Karchi, the UCLA beat writer for the OC Register. We're here tonight in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome, where UCLA just won the Alamo Bowl 40-35. And Ryan, it was a little tighter than we all thought it was going to be. I think it was 31-6 at halftime, and we were all writing our game stories like this one's over, and I'm so happy it's done, and we get to put up a story. And then all of a sudden, second half comes, and it's pretty tight. But before we get into that, I want to get into the sexy topic of the afternoon or the evening and on buzzing on Twitter and all that of Jim Mora's handshake with Bill Snyder. After the game, they had kind of a little, I guess, roughhousing with the knee. Brett Hundley taking a knee and some guys taking a shot at him and all this stuff. And I think Jim Mora took exception to it. Didn't shake Bill Snyder's hand, but then did, and now it's all over Twitter. Tell me your thoughts on it, man.
Well, first, I don't think anything with Bill Snyder has ever been described as sexy, but moving on. I think it was probably a bigger deal on social media than it actually is. I mean, Mora ended up going and actually shaking his hand a second time that, cameras didn't capture as closely. So I think that's kind of water under the bridge. And at the same time, I know a lot of people, think Mora may have acted dramatically on it. And he went to Twitter and said, I'll defend my players forever, that sort of thing. And sure, maybe it was dramatic, but at the same time, you see his players react, and all of his players are they're pumped about the fact that their coach would do something like that. Granted, not sure he needed to go talk about it on Twitter, but at the same time, I don't think it's too big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, a little bit blown out of proportion. I mean, it was probably a little Bush what Kansas State did. It was probably a little Bush what Jim Mora did, but I don't think it needs to be all over Twitter and Vine and all that. So moving on to the game, UCLA wins its 10th win of the season, 10th game of the season, and does it back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1997, 1998. The game really was kind of epitomized, I guess, by Paul Perkins. He had 194 rushing yards, career high, did really well. You were really impressed with the offense tonight. Tell me why.
I thought it was interesting, especially just because, Noel Mazzoni came out and said that, he wanted to be patient with the offense, and that meant running the ball, and he kept going back to the well. They, on third down, a lot of times they showed the confidence to give it to Paul Perkins on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, and more often than not, he picked it up. So I'm just stunned by the development of Paul Perkins this year. He has really turned into clearly one of the Pac-12's best running backs, clearly going to be the linchpin of UCLA's offense next year, whether it's Josh Rosen or Jerry Neuheisel who starts at quarterback, and I think they can feel pretty confident that their offense is going to be in good hands, and I thought it was kind of a fitting finale, on that last touchdown drive for UCLA. You assume, Brett Hundley, being the guy for so long, this is probably his last few plays, and they just keep handing it off to Paul Perkins. I know they're trying to run the clock out, but it just seemed like he was almost kind of passing the torch along. That Brett didn't have a great game in terms of statistically. He ran for, I think it was 96 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first half. I think his finger was definitely bothering him. Noel Mazzoni said afterwards some of his throws look wobbly. But it was still kind of a gutsy performance for Brett, and he kind of took a back seat to Paul Perkins. And I thought, when it comes to this offense next season, that's what it's going to have to be predicated on. And I think if you're relying on Paul Perkins the way he's improved just this season, considering how much he'll improve into next season, you have to be pretty confident if you're UCLA.
One of the other big takeaways I had, I think we both had, was the defense, starting with Jeff Ulbrich. I mean, has that guy found his rhythm or what? The way he was able to dial up pressure with kind of slot blitzes and corner blitzes, and there was one time I even saw like kind of a stunt and a twist where Deion Hollins went from the end spot almost basically twisted around to the other end spot during the play to get some pressure on Waters. And I thought just it was a brilliant game plan, and you could tell they had watched all kinds of film. Deion Hollins had said he watched the spider cam of their game against Baylor and was able to pick up a snap count. And I mean, all that stems from Jeff Ulbrich. Like, here's the tape you need to watch. This is what you need to do. And I think he's really finding his rhythm. I think it really bodes well. And the other guy I want to talk about was Miles Jack. That was so impressive what he did tonight. I think he had a hamstring cramp even because he was out there just going so hard and doing so many things, playing inside linebacker and outside linebacker and safety and corner and wherever you wanted to put him at. That big interception and 8 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Just an incredible athlete, an incredible player. I thought, those kind of two guys, Deion Hollins and Miles Jack, with Ulbrich's kind of, finding his groove as a defensive coordinator, I think it really, really bodes well for the future.
It tells you how good their defense looked at times that we didn't even mention Eric Kendricks in that conversation. He's the one who won Defensive Player of the Game, 10 tackles, 3 for loss, 2 sacks, which doubled his season total. He had you want to talk about fitting finales, his was definitely fitting. But I agree, Jeff Ulbrich, I thought it was telling of his evolution as a defensive coordinator, that at the beginning of the season, he's telling us, I don't want this to be a gimmicky offense. I don't want to call a ton of blitzes and have all these stunts. And he kind of realized after a while that that wasn't working, and he changed, which I think is saying a lot for a guy who probably came in, thinking about this system for, the last 10, 12 years, and he adjusted. By the end of the season, going into next season, I think you can look at that defense and think, you lose a few guys, you lose Kendricks, you lose Oa, you lose Anthony Jefferson, but you return most of that young talent, and that defense, you're looking at potentially one of the best defenses in the Pac-12 next season.
Now, this whole season, I mean, it's not where they wanted to be. I know Devin Lucian, we talked to him after the game, and he said, man, I was watching those Final Four games, and that's what I wanted to do. But it is 10 wins. It's the second straight year. It's in the Alamo Dome. It's against the number 11 team in the country. And really, if it weren't for a few breaks here and there in the second half, it's a laugher. So tell me, I mean, in your opinion, is this season a success?
It's a loaded question, because I think you look at 10 wins on the surface and you think, oh, well, that was, that's better than a lot of people might have expected in a normal UCLA season. But given the expectations before this one, you can't help but wonder, could they have gotten more? And I know, wins are all that counts, but you look at some of those games and they never necessarily looked like that consistent team all throughout. And I think that's, I do think Jim Moore is right that, youth and inexperience has something to do with that. But that mistake can only be relied on for so long, and I think that eventually next season we'll see especially where that defense goes and where some of the inconsistencies from this year's team kind of change. So I'm not sure if you can call it a full success. I don't think this is something if you're a UCLA fan or a UCLA player, you'd be disappointed about. I mean, back-to-back 10-win seasons certainly mean something, but like you said, when they had hopes of a national title, or when people had talked them up so much as this very talented team, which they obviously are, then you probably hope for a little bit more consistency. And consistency was just not their strength this year.
And either way, I mean, Jordan Payton probably said it best after the game tonight. He said, whoever gets this starting quarterback job is going to have the keys to a Ferrari now. And they're going to be kind of anticipating having a Ferrari next season. If they have a guy that drives that Ferrari, they're going to be pretty happy. So you can follow Ryan's coverage of UCLA on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi, and you can follow me on Twitter at EdwardLewisBSR. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.